So what I want to do is we're going to start reading the first three verses, Psalm 18, and we're going to read, starting in verse 1, I will love thee, O Lord. So I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. This is one of the longest psalms. There are others that are longer, but this is one of the longest in all the Psalter. We're not going to go through the entirety of it, but it would be tremendously beneficial if we did that. And I want to encourage you to look over the entirety of this Psalter, or this psalm, and really try to identify the different movements of the section. Not to do that now, obviously, but at another time in the near future. What we looked at was the beginning of that, and it really is a response upon the day of God's deliverance, the day that God wholly delivered David. You know the name John Paton. I've brought it up before. He was a Scottish Presbyterian evangelical missionary to the New Hebrides. That's an area where at the time, which would have been the 1800s, he died in 1907, that was primarily occupied by cannibals. And he went to those islands. He experienced just tremendous suffering and heartache, lost a wife, lost a child, went through numbers of different trials of the islanders wanting to kill him, plotting to kill him, coming to kill him. At one time, he went to go visit a man. I believe that man was sick, and that man pulled out a knife and held it to his chest. It was a bit of time, a pause. Finally, the man called and said to him to run. And Paton took off running, ran all the way back. There was another time where a faction of warriors determined to murder the missionaries and destroy the mission station. They surrounded Paton's home one night, armed and ready to kill. I want to read you an account. This is in quotes. I want to read this to you. Just follow what took place. One night, hostile natives surrounded the mission station, intent on burning out the Patons and killing them. Paton and his wife prayed during that terror-filled night that God would deliver them. When daylight came, they were amazed to see that their attackers left. A year later, the chief of the tribe was converted to Christ. Remembering what had happened, Paton asked the chief what had kept him from burning down the house and killing them. The chief replied in surprise, "Who were all those men who were with you there?" Paton knew no men were present, but the chief said he was afraid to attack because he had seen hundreds of big men in shining garments with drawn swords circling the mission station. Now that obviously is something exceptional. No reason to doubt Paton's account, no reason to doubt what that chief said. It would be later that Paton would write this: "In joy we united our praises. Truly our precious Jesus has all power. Often since have I wept over his love and mercy in that deliverance." That's what we're coming to in Psalm 18. We're coming to a man who is just awestruck at God's deliverances. Did you know that in the Psalms, some 60 to 70 of the 150 deal with suffering? I don't know if you've put this together before, but somebody rightly said, I believe, that the Proverbs are the mind of the king, but the Psalms are his heart. And the heart of the king, if we understand this, the content is a heart that's filled with suffering. If you just think about that in respect to the Messiah as the King of all kings, it certainly reflects him. He was a man of what? A man of sorrows. and acquainted with grief. Grief is something that strikes the soul of somebody who's lost someone dear to them. Let me ask you a question. What is the effect upon God's children when God either gives sustaining grace or whole deliverance from suffering? Have you passed through suffering? Have you come to know that, at least in some measure? I trust if you're passing through suffering right now that you are experiencing grace, and if you continue to pass through it, that God will either bring deliverance in this life or full deliverance in the next. But it is all the work of God. It is His deliverance. Certainly we could tell of deliverance after deliverance like Peyton's. We could spend the rest of our time scouring history of that which has been recorded and find plenty to fill our time with stories of repeated instances of God's deliverances. I mentioned to you that I had given you a sheet. I want you to look at that now. If you start at the very beginning, it's in 1 Samuel 17. It's the lion and the bear. You could go down through that. The number 2 entry is about Goliath. Number 3 is Saul hurling a spear at David twice. God delivered both times. Number 4, David kills 200 Philistines. You jump down, number 6, Saul hurls another spear at David. Number 7, soldiers are sent to David's house to kill him at dawn. He escapes at night by the help of his wife Michal. Number 8, Saul sent 3 armed companies to Ramah to seize David, and the Spirit of God seizes them all, and they prophesy, and David's able to escape. You go down, there's danger after danger, there's deprivation after deprivation. If I turn it over, number 14, Saul's forces surround David at Ziph, and there's another deliverance. In number 15, Saul entered the very cave where David was at En-Gedi. I mean, that was the hand of God. Amazing. In number 17, Saul pursued with 3,000 soldiers against this man and his mighty men. God casts a deep sleep upon the entire camp of Saul and the soldiers, and David's able to go right to that area unnoticed. He sends one of his own men to retrieve items, a spear and a water jug from Saul. Amazing. Number 20, the Amalekites burned Ziklag. Remember, everybody was then against him, and he feared for his life even from his own, but they recovered everything. Not a person was lost, and David was fully restored. In 21, the Philistines mobilized twice to destroy the newly crowned king. God gave specific instructions to David, and God delivered David on those 2 cases also. There were campaigns against various kingdoms. You have Absalom's coup. You have David exhausted in battle, and even there, though he should have stayed back due to his age, he is delivered by one of his mighty men. 24 deliverances. Now, why do we have that? Why do we want to magnify all of these enemies against David and all the different ways that he was delivered? Well, it's because of this. Look at the pre-statement on Psalm 18. Look at the pre-statement. You might think, well, what is that? Well, this is actually brought into this from the original writing of this particular psalm. And it says this, to the chief musician, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who spake unto the Lord the words of this song in the day, and this is it, in the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Not just Saul, but all of his enemies. That's why when we consider this, we're considering in this list, this 24, all of his enemies. Is David considering all this in one group? I don't know. There's not a specific statement regarding that. But certainly it would encompass every deliverance that God gave to David. God gave on every single one of these cases. And certainly there was something more than just Saul that filled his heart and mind when he wrote Psalm 18. That pre-statement is actually the very same statement in 2 Samuel 22, verse 1. It's the same exact statement. What you have at Psalm 18 is the same from 2 Samuel 22, 1, most likely brought over into this text to give us context. And if you look at your sheet again, what do you notice? The very last, number 24, ends with 2 Samuel 21, 15 to 17. So chronologically, we are in the right framework when we consider all 24 of those. Now, this suffering that he experienced is all summarized in Psalm 18 in just 2 verses. Look at verse 4. This is how David would describe what he passed through and all of that suffering. The sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. And that would be the idea of the grave. The snares of death prevented me or brought themselves close to approach me and confront me. Have you been brought to such sorrows that you would describe it in that way? David had. Time and time again, he was confronted with the loss of his life repeatedly. Have you ever been in a situation like that? We were in that situation that we've mentioned before with some armed bandits that came into the house. They didn't come in the house with squirt guns, right? Why do you bring a knife breaking through the door into somebody's home? What's the purpose of the knife? Yet David experienced it over and over and over again. This is the reality. This is the setting of Psalm 18. The setting is he is delivered from all of these troubles. Now, what we want to consider is this, the effect of God's deliverances. That's what we have in verses 1 through 3. Now, we have it in the other part of the context, but as I said, this is a lengthy psalm, and we're just going to touch on a few found within this. So let's work through that. We have 4 on our sheet. The first one is this. The first effect is this. It solidifies. When God delivers us from our suffering, from our difficulties, when he does that, it solidifies who God is to me. To me. It solidifies who God is to this person right here, the one that he delivered. It is exceptionally personal. Have you ever had somebody come and talk to you about the difficulties you're going through and just show empathy and concern for you? And that's tremendous. And it's a great comfort, and we should do that. But no one is truly, personally passing through the sufferings you're passing through except for you. You are the one passing through them. And let me point this out. And I do think that you say, what about my wife and I? We're married and we are one. And that's absolutely true. And there might be things that you're passing through together. But there might be nuances even of the same suffering that's touching you both differently. You are, I don't know if you understand this, men, but your wife is different than a man. And women, I don't know if you understand this, men are different creatures. And we are. And with that come, God is not incapable of using the same kind of suffering and working it with different nuances in the hearts of even a husband and wife. It's touching you deeply in different ways. And even some things that the other one is not feeling at all. When God delivers, he solidifies who God is to me. If you look at this, we have here all these different statements. My strength, my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my strength, my buckler, the horn of my salvation, and my high tower. Are you ready to blast through all 8 of those? And look at all the cross references for all 8 of those. We could do that, and it would be rich. It'd be a rich devotion for you to do. We're not going to do that, but we do want to pull this out of it. There are certain things that are common or thematic to those 8 statements. What is the most common thread to all 8 of those declarations? What's the most common thread? My. Has that ever struck you when you read through Psalm 18? My. You know what? He was his mighty men's God also. He was Israel's God. He was his closest allies and friends' God also. But this is personal. He passed through the sufferings personally, and in the end, it is just striking him. He is being brought through personal suffering to his God in a very personal way. He is being brought unto God through the suffering. And that is absolutely tremendous and absolutely a necessity to us. Let me ask a question. Have you ever wondered, couldn't God do these things without the suffering? Couldn't God do that without the suffering? Don't ask that question. He is God. He is God. He knows what's necessary to draw us to himself. So in a greater and deeper way, with suffering after suffering and layer after layer of difficulty and trouble in the soul, as he works, either delivering by sustaining or delivering wholly from the problem, he draws us closer and closer and more intimate and closer to himself. And there's a repetition here for a purpose. Next, there are declarations of security, strength, rock, fortress, strength, buckler, high tower. These are common threads. It's speaking of security. With God, you're okay. Right? With God, you are secure. Everything can be torn apart around you in your life. With your God, you are secure. Spurgeon said this, "No faith is so precious as that which lives and triumphs through adversity. Tested faith brings experience. We should never have believed your own weakness. You would never have believed your own weakness had you not needed to pass through trials. And you would never have known God's strength had his strength not been needed to carry you through. You never would have known how secure you are in God unless he brought you to the threshold of the cliff and into the midst of the fire. So now you can say with greater and greater confidence, with every single trial and suffering you pass through and every single affliction, you can say, my God is my security." You can say that. And then there's declarations of deliverance. My deliverer, the horn of my salvation. And you see this in this psalm. You see it in other similar psalms. That the psalmist, in passing through suffering and affliction and trouble, comes out the other side. And he is just strengthened that God is his salvation. Nothing else. In your immaturity, in the early years of your coming to Christ, did you have the same conviction you have now that really only God can deliver you? As you pass through troubles and suffering and affliction, this becomes a deeper and deeper reality. It is your soul crying back to you, He is my salvation. He is my deliverer. He is my help. And then secondly, not only does it solidify who God is to me, but as God brings us to the day of deliverance, it deepens love for God. Very first words, I will love thee, O Lord. I will love thee. What should flow from our hearts when God delivers us? Not entitlement. Not a perspective of God like a genie in a bottle that we can rub when we need Him and He will help. What should flow from the soul of the man who's been brought through suffering and God delivered as he called out to God is love. And I believe that God is intent on bringing this about in our souls. That we will be brought to a deeper and deeper love for Him. And if there's anything else of this flesh that's creeping in and muddying the waters of our love, He will purify us of that. He will work that through. Have you ever gone through suffering and it's just been deep and there's been multiple different ways that you've gone through suffering? Have you ever asked the question, what is the Lord trying to purge out of my soul? Maybe some impurities in your love. It can be that our love is impure in some way, and He needs a pure love. I will love you, O Lord. Are we willing to pass through the fire so that we might enjoy a deeper love for our God? Are we willing to do that? This, as I said, is not the only psalm that connects those. Are we willing to pass through the fire to have a deeper love for our God? How many times have we sung, "More love to thee, O Christ, more love to thee"? Over and over again we've sung that. If that has truly been our heart's desire, and that's a prayer, in part God is working through suffering and deliverance to bring us to a greater and deeper love. He is. In Psalm 116, listen to this. I love the Lord because He hath heard my voice and my supplications. John Piper says this, all God's tests are designed to deepen our love for Him. Another writer with desiringgod.org says this, God refines us in the fire. The flames in our life sanctify us and draw us to God in ways that nothing else can do. At least in this, it deepens our love for God. As we experience His divine grace sustaining us through it, or in His full deliverance, we know that's our God. He's the one doing it. It's amazing. The eternal God working for me. That's my God. And it deepens my love for Him. Thirdly, it builds faith in God. It says right in the text, in verse 2, in whom I will trust. It's inserted right in the midst of all these statements about God. Faith is built every time God intervenes in our behalf. Every time He intervenes, I should say, there is opportunity for that faith to be built. Was David a man of faith? I would say absolutely. But did you know, depending on how you consider his first age when he went against Goliath, that we might be considering a span of around 10 years of time where just Saul was chasing after him? Maybe a little bit less. But he was a man of faith. Well, when we suffer, and he was suffering all through those times, and time again, God was intervening. He wasn't fully delivering. Those smaller interventions, that's what I would say is the grace we experience through some suffering. Not full deliverance, but grace to sustain us. And he was being sustained. All through that, his faith is being built and strengthened and built and built. You remember back in his very first time when he is spoken to about going against Goliath. What is it that built his faith to think he could go against Goliath? What did he say? The lion and the bear, right? Past deliverance built his faith, giant Goliath, right? Another quote from a contemporary pastor: strange as it may seem, one of the primary purposes of being shaken by suffering is to make our faith more unshakable. Spurgeon said, the trial of your faith will increase, develop, deepen, and strengthen it. The way to stronger faith usually lies along the rough pathway of sorrow. We think of Spurgeon, we just have him in such a glorified position. That man suffered. Intensely suffered. And God definitely built that man's faith. So it solidifies who God is to me. It deepens love for God. It builds faith in God. Then lastly, it establishes committed, confident return to God. Committed, confident return to God. So we see at the end of these verses, verse 3, I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be, future, saved from my enemies. At the end of all that deliverance, you have a man who has a deeper love. He's personally closer to his God. He's built up in his faith. But there's another aspect of faith. What do you call it when you have a committed, confident expectation that God will deliver? What do you call that? That's hope. That's biblical hope. This man was committed to call upon God, knowing that God would deliver. He knew that. He knew it because of what God had already done. He knew it. It was certain. He knew that that would happen. In Psalm 116, later on in that same psalm, what shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits towards me? I will take the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. In 2 Timothy, more modern situation, Paul is imprisoned. He comes before to receive his charge. It says in verse 16 that no man stood with him. But then in verse 17 it says, notwithstanding the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, that by me the preaching might be fully known, that all the Gentiles might hear, and I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. That's what happened in the past. But here is this confident conviction in his soul of what will happen. And the Lord shall deliver me from every evil work and will preserve me unto his heavenly kingdom. And we know that he did eventually die for the faith. He was confident of God's deliverance, and he would call out in that confidence. John Newton wrote in a letter on assurance to Mrs. Wilberforce the following. Listen to this. Assurance grows by repeated conflict, by our repeated experimental proof of the Lord's power and goodness to save. When we have been brought very low and helped, sorely wounded and healed, cast down and raised again, have given up all hope and been suddenly snatched from danger and placed in safety. And when these things have been repeated to us and in us 1,000 times over, we begin to learn to trust simply to the word and power of God, beyond and against appearances. And this trust, when habitual and strong, bears the name of assurance. That is assurance. So what happens in the end? In the end of these 50 verses, breaking out of the structure, there is this closing statement. You could say it's really part of one of the effects in this man from being delivered by God. It says this in verse 49, "Therefore will I give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen, and sing praises unto thy name. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore." I want to just read to you as we close our time one more quote. It's from Spurgeon. It's on a sermon regarding Ziklag and how David encouraged himself in God. Listen to these words. This is just a powerful statement. "I, the preacher of this hour, beg to bear my witness that the worst days I have ever had have turned out to be my best days. And when God has seemed most cruel to me, he has then been most kind. If there is anything in this world for which I would bless him more than for anything else, it is for pain and affliction. I am sure that in these things the richest, tenderest love has been manifest to me. Our fathers' wagons rumble most heavily when they are bringing us the richest freight of the bullion of his grace." Then he said this, "Love letters from heaven are often sent in black-edged envelopes." You might be saying, well, what is a black-edged envelope? Back in the day during Spurgeon's time, when somebody would lose a loved one, they would get correspondence in envelopes with a black edge, and they would send them out. And whoever had an envelope that they would receive with a black edge would know that inside is grief and sorrow and pain. And so Spurgeon is saying that the love letters from heaven are often sent with grief and sorrow and pain. But they are his love letters. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I do thank you for your grace.